So I'm going to show you how to get started on Eclipse with a couple things. We're going to start with something I'll show you in many, many places. I want to make sure you have it down. But we're going to start by opening the project. We go to File, Open Project from File System, and then we need to navigate to wherever you downloaded it. So I have it in my Git repository, and I called this one a starter project. Starts up top, and it's a good place to start. Now, do not select anything inside that. You select that folder, do not select the source folder or anything else. What you should see is folder, a starter project, import as Eclipse project. If you see anything else, Eclipse will seem to work, but will not work. So you need to make sure it says Eclipse project anytime you're importing my code. So now that I have this, we have some code here. Now, almost every one of these projects is going to have a test folder. There's going to be the unit tests that run. What I want you to do before you do anything else is you can open this or not. I'll show you. You don't have to open it, but you should click on it and run it. Now, I haven't even looked at the code. I don't even know which one I'm going to edit, but I'm going to go ahead and run this. And it's going to give me a failure. So it says test creation, it failed, okay? But the great part about this is before I even know what's going on, I've run this and I've started the clock on my ledger. The ledger file is what shows the work you're going to do. And by running it before I do anything, number one, I prove that I started from scratch. I haven't taken anybody else's code. I haven't just copied and pasted a bunch of stuff. There's nothing fishy going on. And number two, I start the time clock. Before I've even written a line of code, I punch my time clock of this is the time I started. Now, don't do that 3 weeks before you start, right? I mean, do it about the time, do it before you start the first time, so that way you know. I mean, or when you're actually going to do the code, you've run it before, that's fine. Just run it again before you're ready to write code, and then come up to your project and say refresh. You can see the F5 button can work, but the F5 button is where you're currently targeted. So if you go right up here and say refresh, it refreshes everything, and then you can see the ledger file appears. Now, the ledger file is nothing you can read. I'm going to double click it, but don't edit it. You can see it's a bunch of nasty characters. If you edit any of these characters, it might not work and you'll lose all the work you've done. You probably will need to start over from scratch. You do that more than once or twice, then I'm going to get suspicious that maybe you're trying to pull a fast one. But it does happen occasionally. Don't panic. But generally speaking, follow this process, you'll be fine. So you can see the file you're working on now is starter code. Notice there's another test file, there's another helper, and the name I named this do not submit me. The only thing you're going to submit in most of the assignments is going to be one file, the one that the ledger gets produced with. There might be an occasional exception, but we'll talk about that when that comes up. So now I know which file I'm going to edit. So this is the file I have going on. And so again, run before coding. If you find you're going to go edit something, don't run it one time. Get that ledger started. So before I do anything else here, I want to submit it just to show you what that process looks like and show you why you need to start editing right away. You run it right away, excuse me, before you start editing. So here's the submission place. You can see Java Basics, a place to start. That's what it's named for this one. Might be named something slightly different depending on the class and what I have going on. But I'm going to say, and this might look different for you, but upload submission. I'm in a teacher mode, so it might look a little different. But now you see once I have this is awesome right here. I can go to my Eclipse. I can pick the file and the ledger, both of them. I can drag them, tab over, and drop them. And I have them right here. But I'm not done yet. If I submit it right here, which I'll do just so you can see it, it's going to give me an error. It's going to say you don't have a cover sheet. It takes a couple minutes to do that, though. So I'm going to go start working on the cover sheet. So here's the cover sheet. I already have one filled out. It's not the end of the world. You can start with one filled out. You have your name, you can save it, your ID number. I want to know how much time you spent though. So if you have a temporary cover sheet, that's fine. But before you submit, when you think your code's working, how much time did you spend on this? If you find a mistake and you spend 10 more minutes, you can update it. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. If you come back 3 days later, you should be creating a new file. This should be the results of your work. This should be a summary of what's going on. This time spent here should align with your ledger pretty closely. The submission date can be today or tomorrow. There's a little bit of flexibility there, but if I try and do yesterday, it won't work. You should tell me, do you think your code is going to work? This lets me know that, hey, you're confident, and thus if it's broken, you'll fix it. Or I don't know, I have no clue what's going on. I'm looking for help. Please let me know. Collaborators is absolutely required. You must do this in. who did you work with? In this case, we're all working on it together. And we're using my Mimic video to do this code. And maybe you looked at something online, and you talked to somebody. Just tell me where you got this from. It doesn't have to be, I looked up how a print statement works on Slashdot. No, that's not what I want to see. I want to see code you saw that matches this solution, that you could have copied and pasted and just submitted, perhaps, or watched the video and just submitted exactly there. If you've just kind of took some advice and hacked it together, that's what professionals do all the time. And then take some time and reflect. Hey, what challenges do you face? What did you discover and learn? What do you need to practice further? Why? Two reasons. Number one, these are the types of stories that interviewers will ask you someday. You need to worry about these types of stories because that's the way you get jobs. People want to know that you're reflective about your work, that you can talk intelligently about that, to prove that you've done interesting things, not just taking classes where you took paper and pencil tests. It's also going to increase how much you remember. Believe it or not, spending an extra 5 minutes reflecting on that, you'll learn so much more and you'll use that knowledge better later on. If you have something you specifically want feedback on, let me know. It's not required. But don't just say, is my code good? A, I don't know what that means. B, if everybody says that I'm doing a time 100 assignments, 100 people, 20 assignments, 50 assignments, I spend all my time just reviewing code randomly just because people are curious about it. Don't ask for advice if you don't know what feedback you want. If you just ask for general feedback, you get very non-specific, wishy-washy feedback. If you know something's wrong, then ask. If you really just want feedback, schedule time. Make it a priority for you to spend time, not just like, yeah, I mean, you know, give me time. So this should be something specific. Hey, my code's broken in this way, or I'm worried about this specific thing, not just, yeah, any feedback would be helpful. Because that's just not adding value. So again, once you have this all together, save it, and notice if you don't have a cover sheet, nothing gets done. So I got to resubmit it all because I didn't do a cover sheet. So let me go back to my Eclipse, and I can drag those two over, and then I'm going to go to my cover sheet. I'm going to drag and drop that one over, and I'm going to upload that, and then this is going to run something here. And so I'd like you to, as we're doing this, I'd like you to go through this process. Run it one time, create a cover sheet, maybe try it with and without, just see what the errors look like, or just get it all together and make sure. I mean, if you do it right every time, you'll never have to worry about the errors. But just understand this process. Don't get to week 7 and say, I didn't understand it. This is something I want you to do right away. But you can see here, the cover sheet gets typed in a little bit. It lets me see your questions, your challenges. Let me read about your assignment real quick, who you collaborated with. And then your ledger gets printed out here. So you can see the exact time I ran the code. Shows up right here. So you can see I only ran it one time, so I spent 0 seconds writing code between those times. And so I spent no time on it. So if you submit something that looks like this, you will get no points for it. It'll get invalidated. Anything you do pass. Generally speaking, if you spend less than 15 minutes, it's going to be questionable. Certainly anything less than 5 or 10 minutes is, almost impossible for any of these assignments. So you need to submit this with integrity. It needs to be something there. Notice 0 out of 0 doesn't mean it failed. There's no points available for this anyway. If these fail, it won't run the rest of the stuff. So the one that's important you can see is the one that's red. You didn't pass it, 5 points out there. Notice it says 40. It's because I forgot to edit it. You'll get 10 points on this overall. But that's what's going on here. You're just practicing. This is what's going to give you feedback of what's going on. This test almost always is the exact same thing that you're running locally on your machine. So if you get it running locally, it should work here. If your code doesn't compile or something like that because you changed another file, you changed interface, we'll talk about that in a second, then you'll see those errors show up here instead. All right, so I'm going to leave it there for a second. I want you to go and play with this and get this first process going, and then we'll make the code work, and you'll see when it runs successfully on the next video.